This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My program today goes back to take a look at the International Women's Day Festival, which occurred on March 13th, Sunday, March 13th. And it was all afternoon that day, from 2 to 6. I myself started out the proceedings after the introductions in general, in the way that I have for 7 previous years that I have been on the planning committee for International Women's Day Festival. This is the first year that we have a new director of the Ohio University Women's Center, and that is Dr. M. Geneva Murray. We will be seeing several pictures of Dr. Murray in short order, because first she introduced the day itself, and later she came on, very interestingly, dressed as a suffragist in long skirts that they had in, say, 1910 or thereabouts, because women's suffrage, that is to say, votes for women, were not passed until the 19th Amendment was ratified on August 26, 1920. So she appears as the women were in about 1910 with a big, beautiful hat and long skirts, and carrying a banner, which was actually one that was carried during World War I, when women favoring suffrage were picketing the White House in Washington, D.C., and asking President Wilson to support votes for women. We'll see an actual picture of that later on in the material that was taped on Sunday, March 13th. I want to begin, too, by saying something about the passage of women's suffrage. You know, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, in the spring of 1848. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton helped to set that up. In fact, it was held in Seneca Falls because that was where she was living at the time. But it was not until 1920, as I said, that the amendment to the Constitution was passed, ratified, and became part of the Constitution, which permitted women citizens all across the United States to vote. So there were some big times before that occurred. As you can see, that's quite a long time, over 70 years until the passage of women's suffrage. Now, one of the people that is shown in the tape that we will be viewing from March 13th is we had 2 very good MCs, and one of them was Monica Hatfield Price from Lancaster, who is a graduate student here, and who presented a speech, I believe, written by Alice Paul. Alice Paul was the founder of the Women's Party, and she was even more radical in the people who wanted to have votes for women. She wanted something larger called equality for women, and in that effort, she put forth in 1923 an Equal Rights Amendment, which didn't even get out of committee in Congress until 1972, much after it was first proposed by Alice Paul. Now I have here this is my sash that I wore on Sunday, and it shows different people and different slogans. And this particular one is a picture of Alice Paul as a young woman. She was still around until the 1970s. In fact, I think it was just about the time that she died that the Equal Rights Amendment went to the states, was passed by Congress, but never was actually ratified by enough states. They got to 35 states, and they had to have 37. In fact, Ohio was one of the last, like about the 34th state or 33rd state, to actually ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in 1974. There are a lot of people who feel threatened, apparently. A lot of people, especially men and conservative women, who feel threatened by the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, the Equal Rights Amendment is very brief. It's shorter even than the Women's Suffrage Amendment. It says simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. That's it. Equality for women put into the Constitution, but it never made it there because there are so many people who think somehow that those words are threatening. Equality of rights shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Now, what is threatening about that? I don't understand it myself. But in 1982, the Equal Rights Amendment got term limited out, you might say, because the Congress had put in a time frame. If it had not been ratified by 37 states, it would expire. First of all, in 1979, and then later, they passed a 3-year extension, and it finally died, so to speak, in 1982. However, every Congress, there's some person or Congress people who will come forward to try to pass the Equal Rights Amendment again, but it's never passes. Apparently, it's so threatening to think that equality of rights for women is somehow a threat to conservative women and to a number of men. Well, I've mentioned Alice Paul. Another person who's very important in the passage originally of women's suffrage in 1920 on August 26th was Carrie Chapman Catt, who immediately after the final passage on August 26, 1920, moved to form the League of Women Voters of the United States, which is an organization that I've been involved in for well over 50 years, so long in fact that now I'm an honorary member and don't have to pay dues anymore. Now I want to say something more about these different buttons on my sash that I wore on, and that you will see later on me wearing in the bit that was taken at the festival on March 13th. Well, here's one: pro-child, pro-family, pro-choice. I am a longtime supporter of choice on abortion because I think there are women and their families should decide, not the Congress or the state legislature, how large their families should be. So there are some women who are too old, some who are too young, those who are perhaps in ill health or sick, women who are victims of a rape or incest or of failed contraception, victims of domestic violence. There are a number of reasons why a woman would not want to continue a pregnancy and why it is so important that we do have the choice under the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973 to choose abortion as individuals. But there are many ways in which that's being chipped away at in Ohio and a number of states. And so it is a very important consideration. Well, here's a button which shows a woman who was running when I got this button. She was running for re-election to the Senate of the United States. She was a black woman from Illinois called Carol Moseley Braun. But she was knocked down in the election, in part because it was said that her partner was someone that he was a corrupt person, and therefore they should not vote for Carol Moseley Braun. I heard her speak at an AAUW convention that was held in Chicago. She was from the state of Illinois. Next we have one that says, use your vote. If you don't, you'll lose your voice. This is very important. When you have the vote, you should vote it. Whatever your beliefs, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, etc. My next one here is got a red border to it, and there's a good-looking woman with yellow hair there. Actually, that is a button from the time that Hillary Clinton ran for president in 2008. And of course, she is running again for president. Here's another one that says, vote. Voter, you will lose your voice as a citizen if you don't vote. It's very important to register to vote, and remember that the election coming up this fall, you must be registered with your current address, because that's very important to decide which person represents you on city council, in the state legislature, or in the U.S. Congress. So you have to be registered by 1 month before election day. So it's going to be in early October. If you aren't registered or have moved recently, you need to be registered to vote. My next button here shows Sojourner Truth. And she's the one who saved the day for Francis Dana Gage in the spring of spring of 1851, in a meeting at Akron at which she spoke, in which she said such things as, to a minister who said, if Jesus had wanted women to have equal rights, there would be something among his followers, etc., and there were no disciples who were women. Well, she looked at this minister and she said, where did Christ come from? From God and a woman. And man had nothing to do with that part of it, which went over very big with the audience there in 1851. Here's another use your vote button. And this one says Ohio Women Incorporated, and it talks about Women's Equality Day 2009. I have here a t-shirt that I got at that event. Quite a handsome one, I think. You see it has a peace dove with the woman's sign, the circle with the cross on the bottom. And it says Ohio Women's Equality Day, which, as we said before, is August 26th. Every year we can celebrate Women's Equality Day if we want to. And on the back, our slogan here from Susan B. Anthony, the most famous proponent of women's suffrage from about 1850. She wasn't at the Seneca Falls meeting, but from about 1850 to her death in 2006. Susan B. Anthony, who visited Athens, Ohio in 1887, I believe. There's a plaque up on the Memorial Auditorium, which commemorates that, which was put on in 1995 to celebrate the passage of women's suffrage 75 years earlier in 1920. Susan B. Anthony says in this quote, "Every single inch of ground that woman stands upon today has been gained by the hard work of some little handful of women of the past." And unfortunately, I think that's true. But there are many women who do support women's rights. Now let's see. Oh, here we have an Appalachian button, Appalachian Women's Caravan from '94. Here's a button from the League of Women Voters. As I mentioned, I've been a member for over 50 years. And here's one that says, "Let Ohio women vote." And that looks like one from maybe 1912, when there was an effort to pass women's suffrage in the state of Ohio, which didn't succeed. However, Ohio women had been allowed to vote for school boards ever since 1894. So Ohio women did have a partial vote on local school boards. And here again is the picture of Alice Paul, the founder of the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923. Here's a nice button which shows one of my favorite first ladies. My favorite first lady, in fact, Eleanor Roosevelt, who lived from 1884 to 1962. I remember her well. I was born in 1932, and she became First Lady. You might say she was elected to the position of First Lady because her husband, Franklin D. Roosevelt, won the election in 1932 and became president in March of 1933. He was at the time the governor of New York State, where I was born in 1932. So there are my many buttons. The sash that you will see me wearing in the part of the Women's Festival Day in which I talk about First Ladies from the state of Ohio, because we did have 7 women who were First Ladies of the United States. None of their husbands was particularly famous, shall we say. We're not talking about Lincoln or Roosevelt or George Washington or Theodore Roosevelt or some of the other well-known presidents. But there were 7 First Ladies who were raised in Ohio and married men who came from Ohio and were elected President of the United States. I hope that you're going to enjoy that rather brief performance in which I show their pictures. You don't have to look at me the whole time, because I have some very nice pictures that were got together by the Women's Center to show the women First Ladies in Ohio, who are celebrated in the National Park for Women First Ladies, which is actually a place in Canton and is overseen by a nearby park of a more usual nature. I believe it's the one that is for the Cuyahoga River, which runs near Canton. So these are some of the things that to mention about the people that you will be seeing. And one of the other quite interesting things to me that I think I only realized this today for the first time from my book, Remember the Ladies, which gives death dates and birth dates of famous women. And that is that Alice Paul was born in New Jersey in 1885. And the reason that January 11th particularly strikes a chord with me is that that was the birthday of my mother, Lois Elizabeth Hatch, Dymel Washburn, was born on January 11th in 2002. And in 1937, she was the only woman legislator in the House in the state of Nevada, which is where I was raised. At the time, I was quite a young kid myself, and I don't especially remember that time when she was a state legislator in Nevada. But I know that she was very active in Nevada politics. She was a teacher, a businesswoman. She worked so hard, she finally died rather early, at only age 57. And that was in 1959. So it's been a very, very long time since I lost my mother when I was just a new mother myself in the spring of 1959. And had my baby with me when we went to bury my mother. So that's one of the reasons I'm so interested in women's rights and women's equality. And one of the other things you're going to be seeing in the piece that we do from the Women's Festival is a very nice song, singing. I don't know the title of the song, but it shows the group of singing girls from, or I should say young women from Ohio University who have a singing group called Title IX. Title IX. Why on earth Title IX? Well, that's pretty important because Title IX was an education amendment passed in 1972, and it says, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Well, you know, in 1972, there were only like 2% of women in college who were active in sports. Nowadays, there are many, many more because of the passage of Title IX. So I think it's particularly nice that we're hearing this nice singing done by the Title IX singing group at Ohio University, among the things that we will be seeing coming up. And we will also be hearing from one of the MCs, Monica Hatfield Price. I believe she is reading a actual speech of Alice Paul. I don't think she mentions Alice Paul, so it might have been someone else, but this speech from 1919 was made on the occasion when President Wilson, after the First World War, went to Europe to work on the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the First World War. So from being an opponent of women's suffrage in 1914 and 1917, when women who picketed the White House were sent to jail and force-fed when they tried to protest their jailing. He was a proponent of women's suffrage finally. Actually, by 1920, he was gravely ill, and I don't think that he was really able to do much to move women's suffrage, but it had been taken up partly because of his support in 1917, 18, 19. It was taken up and passed on August 26, 1920. Votes for women.
What we do here today is part of a larger celebration of International Women's Day, internationally recognized on March 8th every year since 1914. Our festival is an opportunity to celebrate the gains women have made worldwide. We also encourage you to think beyond today and ask yourself, what are you doing to promote gender equity? What steps are you taking to continuously improve your knowledge of gender issues? Because while this festival is a celebration, it's also about igniting action and passion to learn more about the status of women worldwide. While women can legally run for political office, the United States ranks 75th worldwide in women's representation. Worldwide, women only hold 22% of national parliamentary seats. Women are still underrepresented in the media, including as news anchors. And sadly, even though we have a successful rise of some news anchors, such as Megyn Kelly on Fox News, we still hear comments that her questions and news coverage might be based on the fact that she's menstruating. When we think of what we can do to support gender equity in our world, we also need to think about how we can empower women who are faced with not just sexism, but racism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, ableism, and all the other systems of oppression. For example, in the United States, women make on average 79 cents to their male counterparts. But the picture is actually a lot more complicated than that. There's a greater disparity for women of color, with Hispanic or Latina women earning 54% of white men's earnings. Change is possible. With all of you here taking action, change is inevitable. And despite the current issues we face, we today see improvement from yesterday. We are making progress in new and exciting ways. We are challenging areas of discrimination, taking to online platforms to make our voices heard, and seeing substantial change. This festival is a call to action, a call to think and not be complacent, and a call for us to re-energize ourselves as we continue to fight inequality in our society and in our world. Please join me in welcoming our MCs to the stage, Zamzam Abijama and Monica Hatfield-Price.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum, and iskawan, as they say in Somali. My name is Zamzam Jama, and I'm a second-year doctoral student here at Ohio University through the School of Communication Studies. My area of interest is really about stories and how stories can relate voices of empowerment and self-advocacy. I like stories, particularly because I'm Somali, which is an oral culture, but also I'm Texan. Y'all, Texans like to talk. A wise man once said, "I don't know, go ask a woman." It's funny because the term wise was only found between the words a and man, and the absence of it between a and woman was profound. We need spaces in which we can talk and celebrate with each other and realize that we don't have to fight the man against the woman, that we can coexist equally in such a space. A wise society said multiple times, "I know, for I have asked and respected a woman."
Thank you for being part of the 2016 International Women's Day Festival. My name is Monica Hatfield-Price. I'm a doctoral candidate in higher education from the Patton College of Education. How many of you have been to the International Women's Day Festival before? Oh, yay! Welcome back. Let's get this festival started. It's my pleasure to introduce our first performer today, Lois Whaley. Lois is an Athens area resident who has been active in our community for 50 years. She is the host of Channel 9's show Women Today and Yesterday from 2006 to the present. She's a longtime convener of the International Women's Day Festival and has been on the planning committee for 7 years. Among many groups, she has been involved in the AAUW, the Girl Scout Black Diamond Council, and the Athens City and Tri-County School Boards. Additionally, she has visited the United Nations headquarters in New York City under every Secretary General since 1949. With a presentation on Ohio's First Ladies, please welcome Lois Whaley.
Is Lois Whaley, just like our late First Lady Nancy Reagan, EA, long A. This is the 100th anniversary of the national parks. And believe it or not, we have a national park right here in Ohio. It's up in Canton. And it is to the first ladies, because Ohio has had 7 women who were first ladies of the United States. The first one is Anna Sims Harrison. She was first lady for only 1 month because she never even made it to Washington, D.C. Her husband, William Henry Harrison, the hero of the Battle of Tippecanoe, died within 1 month of taking office. Anna Sims Harrison. The next first lady is Lucy Webb Hayes, the first lady who had a college education, 1876 to 1880. And she came from Chillicothe, Ohio, our neighboring city. Following Mrs. Hayes was Lucretia Randall. She was only first lady in 1881 because you may remember that her husband was assassinated. The poor man actually stayed around for almost 2 months. The grandson of William Henry Harrison was also president, and his wife was Mary McKeeler, 4-year term, I'm happy to say. The pictures mostly show these women as young women, not as we maybe often see them, rather older people. The next one is Mrs. McKinley. And it's actually her former home that is part of the National Park first presidential ladies in Canton. Her name was Ida Saxton McKinley, and she was first lady until 1901. Unfortunately, her husband was also assassinated, and that's how Theodore Roosevelt, who was vice president, became president. Our next one is Helen Herron Taft, and she was from Cincinnati. She went to the 25th wedding anniversary of Mrs. Hayes. She thought, my husband's going to be the President of the United States sometime, and he was. And you know, he's the only president who also became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. She and he had a good time in the Philippines because, remember, there was that war in 1898, which only lasted a couple of months, and then the United States got what was left of Spain's empire. Finally, we have Florence King Harding. He was elected in 1920, and he actually defeated another Ohioan to become President of the United States, but President Harding died in office. Those are the 7 first ladies. Thank you.
Up next, the Ohio University Title IX is a 17-member, all-woman, student-led soprano-alto a cappella group. They auditioned out of the Ohio Women's Ensemble, and this School of Music affiliated group has represented us, Ohio University. All song covers are arranged by their own members.
Lost hope, I was all alone, never been so long.
Up next, my co-host, Monica, is going to suspend time, and we're going to go back and revisit the challenges that women faced when it came to having the right to vote. It's going to be accompanied by a video screen presentation, so when it gives you cues for responses, don't be shy.
My name is Monica Hatfield Price, and I am a suffragist. Do you know that in this year, 1919, women still do not have the right to vote? Did you know that this is the time to speak up for women's vote, women's suffrage? Did you know that we should fight for the things which we have always held nearest our hearts, for democracy, for the rights of those who submit to authority, to have a voice in their own government? Yay! Did you know that President Woodrow Wilson said those very words as the United States entered World War I, but still has not done all he could for women's vote? We'll no longer ask for the vote. We will demand it. Did you know that as I stood picketing the White House, I was arrested for obstructing traffic while the men who were throwing things at us were allowed to walk free? This prison special, my prison uniform, should incite you to action if nothing else does. Women are going to prison for the vote. Force-fed, beaten by police. For those of us on the prison special tour, plan to speak to 50,000 people before we return to New York City. Will you not join me today to protest our treatment by the administration? Yes! I came here as soon as I was released from prison. I marched with 25 women in New York City, where the president was visiting before going overseas. 200 policemen greeted us with unbelievable ferocity. They beat us back with their clubs with such cruelty. The police seized us, broke our poles, some of them over our backs, trampled our pennants, pounded and dragged us. They should be ashamed to beat American women in this brutal way. If we were breaking the law, I said, arrest us. Do not beat us in this cowardly fashion. 6 of us were arrested, but in half an hour, we were all free. I returned to my comrades afterwards, but the police broke up our meeting, and a man hit me on the side of the head with heavy banner pole. My hat was snatched from my head and burned on the street. I hear that tomorrow the New York newspaper headlines will read, 200 maddened women try to see the president, and 200 women attacked the police. I know that women have been aroused never again to be content with their subjection, that they will ultimately secure for themselves equal power and responsibility in whatever system of government is evolved is certain. How revolutionary will be the changes when women get this power and responsibility? One cannot adequately foretell. However, they will not go back. They will never again be good and willing slaves. Women must depend upon themselves to get equality. No group in the community with lesser rights was ever given liberty by those who had greater power. When all suffrage controversy has died away, it will be the little army of women with their purple, white, and gold banners going to prison for their political freedom that will be remembered. The challenge of the picket lines roused the government out of a half-century sleep of indifference. It made zealous friends and violent enemies. Will you join me today? Yes! We bid women to stand erect with confidence in themselves, in their own judgments. Be self-respecting enough to put your freedom first, and to determine on this day that you should be free.
purple and white, the suffrage colors in the United States. These were the colors of the radical suffrage group, the National Woman's Party. Purple is the color of loyalty, consistency to purpose, unswerving steadfastness to a cause. White, the emblem of purity, symbolizes the quality of our purpose. And gold, the color of light and life, is the torch that guides our purpose, pure and unswerving. Her banner, Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage, was used to put pressure on President Wilson in February 1917.
This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today is Sarah Jenkins, who is the program coordinator for the Women's Center at Baker Center.
Yes.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Lois.
Good to have you on.
Good to be here.
I know you've been active there at the Women's Center for a couple of years now.
Yes, it would be 3 years this coming July.
I see.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from and where you went to college and that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Florida. I was born and raised there. And I ended up getting my undergraduate degree in women's studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
North Carolina.
Yes.
Yes.
I decided I wanted to go out of state. And then I ended up a few years after that deciding to go back to Florida to get my graduate degree. I got my master's from Florida Atlantic University in women's gender and sexuality studies.
Where is that located?
FAU is in Boca Raton, so it's in
Okay.
South Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's nice. It's very pretty, as you can imagine, on the beach.
Imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, beach.
Yeah,
I imagine that was a bit of a draw.
it was very attractive.
Yes. Well, I've been to Florida, I think maybe twice, only twice. Once my husband went there as a boy. He had relatives, a lot of relatives who'd moved from New York down to Florida.
Yeah.
So, and then I went to an AAUW convention in Florida one time.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. And you mentioned that you've been here for almost 3 years.
Yes.
Where did you get your first experience working?
Well, I started working kind of as early as I could at 16. I, had odd summer jobs, but this job was my first job in a women's center. It was really my first job doing something that I loved to do.
Yes.
All of my jobs before this one were really about, necessity versus passion or enjoyment in the work itself. And it was a real fluke that it felt a little like a fluke that I ended up here. I had, and Susanna Dietzel used to love to tell this story. I had applied for this job and I hadn't heard for about a month. I had sort of forgotten that I had applied for it. I had other things going on. I was thinking about applying to some doctorate programs. And then I got a call from Susanna, the former Women's Center director,
Yes.
saying, we loved your application. Would you like to do a phone interview? And I had just signed a new lease for my apartment.
Oh, dear.
And I was very flustered. I wasn't expecting the call. And I said, I don't think I can move. And I hung up, and then I called my mother. And I said, I think I've made a mistake, And I called Susanna back, I think that evening, and left a message and said, I'm sorry, I was flustered. I am really interested in the job. I would obviously break my lease for it. And so she called me back the next day, and we scheduled the phone interview, and then I was invited to campus, and then I got the position. So it felt very serendipitous.
Yes, that certainly sounds serendipitous. So what does a program coordinator do there at the Women's Center?
Sort of what it sounds like. So I focus on creating our calendar of events every semester, I am in charge of making sure we have space for every event, making sure that if we're bringing someone in, that their flights are, booked and their hotels are booked and, anything that they might need. And making sure that everything is in place for each event, So
Yes.
is there any AV that we need to be thinking about?
Oh, yes.
Is there, space outside of the Women's Center that I need to find? Is there food I need to order? So a lot of those details are part of my position. And then I also do a lot of administrative work for the Women's Center. We don't have an administrative assistant, so I do a lot of the finance stuff, making sure that all the receipts are, properly filed and organized in ways that, the tax people will like.
Well, that's pretty important.
It is. It's important, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and of course, most recently, you've been very actively, you've led the meetings that we've had for the planning for the International Women's Day Festival, I know.
Yes, yeah.
And that's interesting. I know you've done it for a couple of years.
It's true. I had certainly been part of the planning committee, for the past 2 years since I got here. But it was interesting to kind of all of a sudden feel like I had the most knowledge about the festival
Right.
in the Women's Center.
Yes.
And, I feel like the festival went really well.
Yes, it did.
And I think that Dr. Murray, our, new director, learned a lot. And I had a lot of fun planning it.
Oh, good. And I suppose you were exceptionally busy on March 13th.
Yes, it was a very busy day. I don't know, I have a Fitbit, and I walked like 5 miles that day just going
Heaven's sake.
around, the ballroom to the Women's Center and back again and all those things. So it's an incredibly hectic day.
Well, and the Women's Center is actually just across from the ballroom.
I know, it's not far, but somehow I still managed to do a lot of walking.
Yes. Did you get a chance to see many of the performances?
I did. I feel like I saw the most performances this year of any year, really. I got to sit in the audience more, I think, and we had an amazing array of performances this year.
Yes.
And this was also the first year that we decided to also hire a professional dance group to do a kind of featured performance for us. So we had the Okinawa Dance School, which is from the Columbus area, come and do traditional Okinawese dance.
Yes.
And the costumes were just breathtaking.
Yes.
And the dances were really subtle and beautiful. And I, was really glad that I got to see that.
Yes, yes. Well, I had a friend who said it was hardly seemed like dance because it was so subtle. It was very, certainly not whirling across the stage or anything like that, but very traditional.
Yes, and I think that brings up a good point about kind of culturally what we decide counts as dance or singing, I mean,
Yes.
all those different art forms are really have a lot of cultural context. And it was very traditional dance, and I really thought that it was very beautiful.
Yes.
I think it was very graceful, and I think it probably reflects a lot of the cultural values of Okinawa and Japan.
Yes.
So it made sense to me that it wasn't necessarily the same kind of dancing that we might expect from another type of culture,
Right.
or the modern dance that we saw that day as well. It was very
Yes.
different.
Yes, but so nice. And one of the singing groups was Title IX.
Yes.
And I think they have performed it maybe every I got involved when they first started, when Susanna Dietzel first began them. And so I'm pretty sure they've done almost every year since then.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, and they're beautiful, wonderful
Yeah.
to hear. And then we also had the co-ed singing group New Chords on the Block that sang, and they did Fight Song, which is this kind of recent pop anthem that is really very moving and uplifting, makes you feel good. And they were also wonderful. I personally love a cappella.
Yes, it was an a cappella group. Do you sing yourself?
I like to sing. I don't sing well, but, I like to sing in my car, like if I turn the radio up really loud,
right.
so I think that it's me singing when really I'm hearing the radio. That's the kind of singing that I do.
I see. It sounds like singing in the shower type.
Exactly, yes. How about you? Do you sing?
Well, yes.
Oh, you're in Calliope, right?
No, I'm not in Calliope.
Oh.
I have sort of aged out of singing, I must
okay.
say, but I sang in high school, and in college I was in a choir at Stanford.
Neat. Oh, cool.
And so I sang every Sunday. We had rehearsal, and we sang so many wonderful things, that it was really a music education in itself to be
neat.
singing with them in the choir, and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so have you lived in other states besides Ohio and North Carolina and Florida?
Let's see. Well, after I graduated from college, I ended up taking a temporary campaign job. It was the 2008 election at the time.
Oh, yes.
And I actually lived in Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, I lived in Royal Oak, Michigan, and I did a lot of campaign, like door-to-door campaign and street campaigning in Detroit.
Oh,
I was
my.
very close to Detroit.
Yes, so that would be a very interesting experience, especially during a presidential election year when so many people come out, so many more people that don't ordinarily actually, unfortunately, don't vote, do come out for the presidential election, and we've certainly had the most exciting year, I think,
It's wild. Yeah.
this year that I can remember at all.
Yeah.
So it is exciting. Well, I understand you're going to be leaving us soon, though.
I am, yes. I have been offered a position at the University of Virginia.
Oh, nice. Charlottesville.
Charlottesville,
Yes.
exactly. And I'll be working in their Women's Center. And their Women's Center is called the Maxine Platzer Lynn Women's Center. And I will be coordinating a mentoring program that they have. It's called the Young Women Leaders Program. And it pairs middle school girls with undergraduate women as mentors.
Oh, great.
Yes, and we actually brought the YWLP program to OU. The Women's Center here, we've been doing it for a couple years, based on the one at UVA. So I'm really looking forward to this new experience.
Yes.
But as you can imagine, I'm also very emotional about leaving Ohio University and leaving all the friends that I've made in Athens as well.
Yes. Well, I'm familiar with Charlottesville because our second son went to Charlottesville.
Oh, cool.
Yes, he was there in the 80s.
Neat.
Quite a long time ago now, but he enjoyed his time there. Perhaps too much. I'll tell you, I was not impressed when I visited his fraternity and saw that the major, I don't know whether you'd call it decoration or what you'd call it, but it was a huge pile of beer
Oh,
cans
God.
in the living room.
Great.
So I don't know
Yeah.
about that.
That's a bummer. I wouldn't be either. I would not be impressed.
At least not favorably.
No, yeah, not favorably.
But, well, that's how some fellows do things.
Yeah.
And so you've just got to grin and bear it, so to speak. But it is such a beautiful place, and of course was begun by Thomas Jefferson himself.
That's right.
And his home is nearby there, Monticello, yes, and so on. Well, we don't have too much more time, and I would appreciate it if you'd give us a final thought, perhaps.
Sure. Let's see. A final thought. Well, I think I guess I can just, thank Athens in general and Ohio University. Like I said earlier, I felt like getting the position here was really serendipitous, and this is the best job I've ever had. Hopefully I'll continue to say that about my future positions as well.
Sure.
But I have loved working here. I've loved working with the students I've gotten to be around, and the community members and the other folks who are at OU and in the Athens area. And I'm really going to miss the family I've created here.
Sure.
And I hope that the next person after me, loves it as much as I did.
Well, let's hope so, yes. But it's nice, too, that you have family there in Virginia.
It is.
And you'll be close to your family. And
Yeah.
so we understand the draw,
Yes. Yeah.
for going to Virginia. And Charlottesville's such a wonderful place.
It is.
And it's been very nice knowing you, Sarah.
It's been nice knowing you too, Lois. I'll miss you.
Well, and best of luck to you
Thank
in your
you.
future endeavors.
Thank you.
This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today has been Sarah Jenkins of the Ohio University Women's Center, and I'm even wearing their T-shirt today.
Looks good.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, again.
Thank you.